The natural world is filled with beauty and wonder, but it can also be a place that challenges our very existence. Disease and devastation can threaten life in an instant. The University of Rhode Island is exploring, questioning, and confronting the darker side of nature through laboratory study and field research. The science of survival, a quest with enormous consequences for all of us. Meet Aedes aegypti, an unassuming insect which, like other species of mosquito, feeds on blood. This tiny terror is responsible for a share of suffering and death that is out of all proportion to its diminutive size. Aedes aegypti can transmit dengue fever, a dangerous and sometimes deadly virus. There is no specific medicine for dengue, sometimes called break-bone fever, and as of now, no vaccine to prevent the spread of the disease. The Institute for Immunology and Informatics, known as I-Cubed, was established in 2008 as part of the University of Rhode Island's Emerging Biotechnology program. Here, dedicated scientists conduct research and testing to develop vaccines that could combat diseases like dengue. Dr. Alan Rothman heads the Laboratory of Viral Immunity and Pathogenesis at I-Cubed.
If you look at the history of vaccine development, much of it was trial and error. And we, as scientists, have taken advantage of things that we can observe in nature. So the vaccines that we use typically, like vaccines for measles, mumps, rubella, poliovirus, all of those were examples of diseases where once you got it, you would be immune to that virus after time. The issue with dengue is that the relationship between the virus and humans is more complicated than that.
Science has unlocked the secrets of this invader's assault on the human body. When biting a person for its blood meal, an infected mosquito releases saliva containing the dengue virus. Once in the body, the virus infects the immune cells in the skin tissue and enters the lymphatic system. The viral infection can then trigger a strong inflammatory reaction. During the incubation period, the virus first replicates locally and then spreads into the bloodstream of the infected person. For some patients, especially children, the infection may cause severe forms of the disease, including dengue hemorrhagic fever. The blood vessels become permeable, resulting in plasma leakage. Dengue hemorrhagic fever requires intensive hospital care and can be fatal.
Part of the nature of severe dengue, and one of the reasons we are particularly interested in it, is that there's an immunologic component where the host actually contributes to making the disease worse.
Typically with the first infection, you either don't realize you're infected or you'll get dengue fever, which is a febrile illness or termed break-bone fever. You feel really bad, but you get over it. It's that second infection with a different, what we call serotype, there are 4 of them, that actually causes more severe disease in some cases.
Dengue fever is a threat to almost half of the world's population. In 2010, the international humanitarian organization, Doctors Without Borders, provided vital medical assistance to the people of Honduras during an outbreak of dengue fever.
In Honduras, more than 50,000 cases of dengue fever have been reported. The number of patients with the common form of dengue has significantly increased. However, the most alarming feature of this outbreak is the prevalence of dengue hemorrhagic fever, which has a mortality rate of more than 10%. More than 1,500 cases have been recorded since the beginning of the year. To support local health services, MSF has set up an emergency ward for children under the age of 15 at the San Felipe Hospital on the outskirts of Tegucigalpa, the country's capital, where the majority of cases have been reported. There's no vaccine or specific medicine against the virus.
The battle against insect-transmitted disease played a vital role in one of our nation's most ambitious engineering projects.
The effort to reduce the abundance of Aedes aegypti in the Americas dates back to the construction of the Panama Canal. And the effort was really sparked by an intention to get rid of yellow fever, which is carried by the same mosquito. So that was incredibly successful at eliminating the mosquito from those parts of the Western Hemisphere. But in reality, the Gulf Coast of the United States has always had the Aedes aegypti mosquito.
Dengue was virtually eradicated from the United States thanks to mosquito spraying and vigorous prevention campaigns. But in 2009, an outbreak in the Florida Keys signaled its return. Florida's warm climate is host to a wide variety of exotic animals and tenacious insects. Imbued with Darwinian strength, the Aedes aegypti is a survivalist that can breed and live almost anywhere. It can hide inside a bottle cap, under a house, or in any container holding water, making it difficult to find and kill. In the summer of 2013, dengue fever was reported on Florida's Atlantic coast. Mosquito control officials are now worried that dengue has established a foothold in the Sunshine State.
There hasn't been a true outbreak with a large number of cases, but the conditions in terms of the presence of the mosquito and the introduction of the virus clearly exist for there to be a larger outbreak in Florida if there's enough contact between humans and mosquitoes.
Recently, Dr. Rothman and his colleagues at iCubed were awarded an $11 million grant from the National Institutes of Health to continue studying dengue virus.
There have been components of the grant that have looked at the patterns of transmission of dengue, looking at the risk factors for who's most likely to get severely ill, looking at different approaches to management of these patients. What are the best laboratory tests to diagnose dengue? Which laboratory tests tell us which children are having a more severe disease? And so all of this is guided around the notion of improving the approaches to either treat dengue, identify it, or prevent infection overall.
Like any medical breakthrough in the history of science, the final victory over dengue fever will not be easily won. But those who have accepted the challenge of fighting this insidious scourge are armed with energy, enthusiasm, and 21st century technology.
Maybe at some point we would be able to develop some type of therapy in order to turn the table on that virus and prevent it from replicating.
There's a lot of interesting science going on. We've learned a tremendous about the immune system in the process. We've learned how to manipulate the immune system in ways that we would never have known how to do before.
The discovery of a vaccine is just the first step in protecting humans from disease. Inoculating people in remote parts of the world has always been a hurdle.
The vaccine is removed from the thermos jug. The instruments are sterilized in boiling water. There are people here who read slowly, others who have never learned. But there's one word they know: vacunación, vaccination. That word means life.
Vaccines are the kind of intervention that have to take place when there's no evidence of the disease. You have to vaccinate people to prevent something from happening. They don't see the disease, but you're coming in with your needle and you're trying to give them a vaccine. So if people don't trust you and they don't understand why you want to give them the vaccine, they're not going to want to get it.
Dr. Annie de Groot has received international recognition for her innovative approach to vaccine development. Her fierce dedication is grounded in personal experience.
I was a medical student and I traveled to Africa. I worked in Zaire and worked on a measles campaign. And until I worked on that campaign, I really had no idea that measles could kill people. I saw that with my own eyes. I saw babies killed by measles. And so that was really the eye-opening moment for me when I realized that not only were infectious diseases really important, but vaccines could actually stop people from dying from them.
Dr. de Groot is the founder and scientific director of iCubed. The Institute applies bioinformatics, the science of analyzing complex data such as genetic codes, to develop treatments and cures for infectious diseases.
At the Institute for Immunology and Informatics, we're trying to understand vaccine mechanism of action. We're trying to understand how vaccines work and how we can make better, more effective, and safer vaccines. So we're doing the basic laboratory work, trying to understand how people respond to, say, flu epitopes or pieces of flu virus, to see if the response will protect them.
Dr. de Groot is also the co-founder and CEO of Epivax, a renowned and highly innovative immunology company.
Basically what we're doing is we're taking cutting-edge immunoinformatics tools, we're applying them to the world's infectious disease problems and trying to actually develop products, new antibodies, for example, that could be used to treat autoimmune disease, and we help other companies make better, safer biologic products.
The science of immunology has evolved slowly, but radical changes are at hand.
Back in the time of Pasteur, when Pasteur was making vaccines, he actually would grab a bacteria right out of the soil, like anthrax, for example, and he would grow it up in his big flasks, and he would then bake it.
You shake and bake.
So shake and bake is the old method. What we're doing at Epivax and what we're doing at University of Rhode Island is to use some computer-based tools to analyze bacteria and viruses and to take the pieces that we know will generate a protective immune response and put just that in the vaccine. So you can kind of think of it as the nouvelle cuisine of vaccine design, and the old version of making vaccines is shake and bake.
Vaccine experts like de Groot feel certain that the future is filled with possibilities that will challenge our imagination.
Oh, I love to talk about the future of vaccines because the vision that I have, and I think that we can actually achieve this in my lifetime, is that we'll be making vaccines on demand. Say you're driving down 95, you have an accident, you end up in the hospital, we'll scan a chip that's in your shoulder, we'll see the immune system type that you are, and we will design a vaccine on the spot for you that will prevent you from getting any bad infections when you go into the intensive care unit at the hospital. That's what we'll be doing. That's the future of vaccines. We'll be doing that using the tools that we have put into use at the Institute for Immunology and Informatics at University of Rhode Island.
The science of survival encompasses both microscopic health threats and danger that confronts us on a global scale. In late October of 2012, a monster slowly began to take shape in the western Caribbean Sea. The storm grew into the largest Atlantic hurricane on record and was unofficially christened Superstorm Sandy.
Right now we're into a man-new terror evacuation mode. We have the fire department along with the police department doing door-to-door in all the low-lying areas, cottage areas down along the beach, and recommended everybody evacuate, making it mandatory.
I started to wonder about if this was going to be the big one, where we have been saying for a very long time that we're overdue for a hurricane and trying to understand what is this going to do to Rhode Island.
As the storm approached, residents and officials gathered by the coast and watched with growing concern as Sandy threatened the ocean state's shoreline. Scientists believe conflicting weather conditions collided in the atmosphere, compounding the impact of this enormous storm. The primary difference between a tropical cyclone, also called a hurricane, and a wintertime cyclone is the energy source. Tropical cyclones extract heat from the ocean and grow by releasing that heat in the atmosphere near the storm center. Wintertime storms get most of their energy from temperature contrasts in the atmosphere, and this energy usually gets distributed over larger areas. Sandy started out as a classic hurricane, gathering strength from the warm waters of the Caribbean and moving northward along the Gulf Stream. But when it took a sharp left turn into the New Jersey and New York coasts, Sandy collided with a winter-like storm system. As its energy source transitioned from the warm ocean water to the atmosphere, Sandy morphed into a wintertime cyclone and increased dramatically in size. With winds spanning over 1,000 miles, Sandy unleashed a deluge of rain on the eastern seaboard.
The other thing that was just very surprising to me was the extent of the flooding. Also, the intensity of the waves.
Surging storm waters whipped by high winds pounded the coast of Rhode Island for hours. All ports in southeastern New England, including Narragansett Bay and Mount Hope Bay, were closed to vessel traffic for days. Mandatory evacuations were ordered for many low-lying communities.
What we were seeing in the damage was incredible amounts of erosion, and the overwash of the sand that went over the barriers was just indescribable.
Estimates of the damage topped $68 billion. Before its rampage ended, over 100 deaths in the United States were attributed to Superstorm Sandy. Mercifully, after rushing inland, the storm finally weakened and grew silent. It was time to assess the damage.
The houses right along the beach, many of them survived, but many of them did not. And you start to see people's lives just unravel.
And I just found that the foundation is cracked too, underneath the chimney.
I'm a business owner on Atlantic Avenue. We had two small businesses there, and the place got devastated with sand. Equipment flipped over, but all the equipment is totally destroyed.
We've talked about what the impacts will be, and then all of a sudden there it is in front of you. Let it be Carpenter's Beach or Misquamicut. It was very sad, very sad.
Gradually, shoreline residents returned to their homes, and coastal communities began to clear away the rubble. Recovery began, yet many questions remained unanswered.
But I think that this kind of a blow of such destruction really did open people's eyes to say, wow, this was only a 5-foot storm surge. This was not the hurricane of '38. Things are changing.
Scientists, politicians, and the public began to consider what role, if any, climate change had played in the catastrophe. Rising temperatures that are the result of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases have been exhaustively researched and documented by scientists around the world. But experts are cautious when it comes to blaming Sandy's fury on global warming.
Climate change is, I think the jury's still out on a lot of what it's going to do for storms. We believe now that the intensity will probably increase on some of these storms, but the scientists are now saying that the frequency might drop. What we're seeing is, though, some very large, very intense storms.
Despite the consensus of climate scientists, the reality of global warming is still greeted by skepticism in some quarters.
I think we're seeing less of the pushback, particularly after Sandy at this point. The pushback that we see with climate change right now is somewhat diminishing here, at least in Rhode Island. I think people are getting it, they see it. If you want to go talk climate change and whether it's occurring or not, go talk to the fishermen because they see climate change on a daily basis.
The hard facts are even more compelling when the topic moves to rising sea levels.
Sea level rise is happening right now. It's happened over the past 100 years. We've seen in Rhode Island, sea levels have risen 10 inches in the past 100 years. So it's not a question of whether it's happening because it's already happening. And in the future, science is projecting it to happen even quicker.
Even small changes in sea levels can dramatically alter coastal landscapes. The results may be cause for concern.
Within the next 50 years, Rhode Island could see 1 to 3 feet of sea level rise. And that would mean that on high tides, roads could be inundated on a daily basis. Houses could have water in their basements. With increasing sea level rise, storm surge is going to penetrate even farther than it does today.
Scientists warn that iconic locations could become unrecognizable.
Places like Providence and Water Place Park will also be affected. As you can see around here, there's not a lot of clearance between the water level and this pathway, but also the roads, the sewers that are beneath them.
Many experts believe that the time to prepare for such changes has already arrived.
We really need to start planning for those impacts now, because they're expensive to deal with and difficult to deal with, but we know that it's coming.
The devastation unleashed on our coastal communities by Superstorm Sandy has led many to reconsider long-held beliefs.
If you're going to live on the sand and enjoy the waterfront as a recreational property, this is the risk you take, and it has happened before, but not like this.
I think it kind of brought it to the forefront of the decision makers' thought process and the people who live down there. We don't have to make the argument for why they should care about these issues. They get it now. They experienced it. They lived through it. And so now they're much more interested in being involved in planning for how we can be more prepared in the future.
Preparing for the future is a key component of SAMP, the Rhode Island Special Area Management Plan. SAMP is bringing state, federal, municipal, academic, and private sector interests together to create a management plan that provides guidance for adapting to shoreline change.
So we are trying to focus not only on what are the problems, but what are some of the solutions? People, the first question they say is, what can I do? The Special Area Management Plan, the beach SAMP, at least on the coast, will be looking at where are the areas of critical concern? What can you do in certain areas? In certain areas you might be able to put up a wall. In other areas you might not be able to put up a wall. Some areas will encourage you to go with a natural solution. Where can we use vegetation? Where can we use dunes and dune grass to both reduce the impact, also increase our quality of life?
There are no simple solutions, but those who have studied the problem agree that procrastination is not an option.
The longer we wait to actually attack the problem and deal with it, our solutions get more costly and the obvious impacts associated with those are greater. So if we don't start to attack the problem, it means somewhere down the line we will start to pay the price for that, and there will be suffering associated with it. And we're starting to see that obviously with the coastal storms and flooding events that we're getting right now.
Fortunately, the Ocean State is in the forefront of this national effort to prepare for changing sea levels.
Rhode Island is in a very good place. Rhode Island's coastal program is one of the strongest in the countries. Because of that, we didn't see more damage. If you look at the barrier beaches of New Jersey and you look how developed the shoreline is, that is where you got so many properties and people displaced. In Rhode Island, over 80% of the barrier beaches are undeveloped. So that is something that is a storm buffer for us. It provides a natural, soft solution to try to work with Mother Nature.
Learning from past events could provide a better future for generations yet to come. Legend speaks of a mighty king who ordered the tide to stop rising, with predictable results. A lesson for the ages that becomes increasingly urgent with each passing day.